Hey everyone, this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for Video Game Talk. Today's discussion is going to be about Monster Hunter Rise, and specifically how important and impressive it is that the game has recently sold through 5 million copies worldwide. Capcom announced previously, after its opening weekend, that Monster Hunter Rise on Nintendo Switch shipped through 4 million copies worldwide. And then just a week later, as of April 4th, they announced 5 million units globally. Now, any unit that is sold digitally through the eShop counts instantly as an automatic sell through to the consumer. What the shipment means in general typically is that Capcom has shipped through, in other words, sold to retailers such as Amazon, Best Buy, GameStop, Walmart, Target, etc., other retailer outlets, brick and mortar stores throughout the world, their copies, and then the consumers buy from them. So the shipment eventually becomes shipped to sold, but you could count this as 5 million copies sold worldwide, okay? And that's just in 9 days and on one platform. It's very, very good news, especially considering Nintendo Switch is around at 84 million or so units sold worldwide. So you're looking at a healthy amount of Nintendo Switch owners already picking up this game in very little time. Why is it so important though? Well, for a few things, for a few reasons. One, this goes to show that if you're a third-party developer out there, and if you take the time to make a video game from the ground up for Nintendo Switch, with a Nintendo Switch in mind, not a port from a game that came out for PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 and you're souping it up for Nintendo Switch, because then a developer could say, if the game doesn't sell well, see, the market's just not there for Nintendo Switch. The game didn't meet our expectations. But you could realistically say, no, it's just because the game has been purchased by millions and millions of people. It's been on the market for over a decade. You know, this is a game that's not cutting edge anymore. It's a title that is now at a reduced price that you could purchase in the aftermarket on something like eBay, or is already in someone's library. So the only real draw is a little bit of an up-resed look and to be able to play it portably, right? So that's more likely than not the reason why your game doesn't sell well. Or a developer could look at a third-party port of an existing game that's on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, and that just happened to come out several months later or a year later on Nintendo Switch, and blame sales on, you see, Nintendo Switch owners just don't buy our efforts, so why put in the effort of making a third-party port on the console? And you could say, no, it's because the game didn't come out day and date with the Xbox One, PS5, Xbox Series X, PS4 equivalent console version. That's more likely the reason why it wouldn't sell well on Nintendo Switch. For instance, if you had Activision's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 the same date on PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch, I guarantee you the Nintendo Switch version would sell very well and better probably than it will eventually when it does come out on Nintendo Switch later this year, because that much time has already passed. Those versions of the game on PS4 and Xbox One, that is, will be cheaper by then. They will have already been on sale a few times by then, and then now you're getting the game, and it's going to be some people's first time playing it and another person's first time playing it portably. Is it worth it buying again, double dipping? Maybe, maybe not. But some developers use different excuses as to why they don't put their AAA budget games on Nintendo Switch or create games from the ground up. Not worth the risk, not worth the effort. Sometimes a port comes and a port is very healthy. Sometimes it takes time for different development reasons to get it to work. You've seen really successful things like Doom Eternal come out on Nintendo Switch, and to be fair, the studio had to take extra time to make that title work on the console because it was pretty taxing. And then you have other games like Wolfenstein 2 and Doom from 2016. They came out they came out later on Nintendo Switch, but for good reason. Nintendo Switch wasn't out in 2016. It didn't come out until 2017, March 3rd, right? So you can see why Doom, for instance, wasn't available on the console in 2016 because the system wasn't out. But here Capcom did something that I gotta give them great applause for because it doesn't happen too often this generation that a third party company makes a powerhouse game with the Nintendo Switch in mind that's not a simultaneous port, of a PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, PS5 game. It's not an old school port of something from the Wii era that they did or a PS3, Xbox 360 game. No, it's built for Nintendo Switch. Whether it gets ported to other systems later on, such as Monster Hunter Rise, seems to be coming to PC early 2022, presumably. This Monster Hunter Rise proves a popular game from a very popular franchise that is now getting better recognition in the West and other markets outside of Japan. It's going to do well. If you're making a good game and you treat the Nintendo Switch audience with respect and give them something of quality, this bodes well for the future of third parties because I think this is going to be an eye-opener. Now, does this mean that everybody's going to start making games from scratch? No, but it could mean that we see some more titles. You see, back in the Wii era, developers were hesitant to make games from the ground up for Wii because the Wii audience was very unique. You had Nintendo games themselves do very well, typically. Mario Kart Wii, extremely high-selling game. New Super Mario Bros. Wii, also very successful. Super Mario Galaxy, Super Smash Bros., Brawl, the list goes on. Nintendo first-party titles did very well overall. And you had a lot of third-party games do well, but a lot of them were the casual gaming market titles. Just Dance, for instance, Carnival Games. Also going back to Nintendo's own games, Wii Sports, and for that matter, third parties company takes on those sporting games, collecting bundle projects. You still had Mortal Kombat, you still had unique stuff like Tatsunoko versus Capcom and Mad World and No More Heroes, but not a ton. You did have sometimes a company like Activision come out with their version of Call of Duty of what the Wii could handle, which was a different scaled down, built for Wii take of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, different than what the PS3 and Xbox 360 were getting, but not everybody followed suit. Yeah, there were Ghostbusters on Wii, and it was a different build than Ghostbusters on PS3 and 360. So I got to give credit to some developers, but we missed a lot of titles. You didn't get Final Fantasy 13 on it. You didn't get the Mortal Kombat reboot or Street Fighter 4 reboot or Grand Theft Auto 4. You didn't get quite a few franchises, Assassin's Creed, Red Dead Redemption. The list sort of goes on, and that's unfortunate. And a lot of companies didn't make blockbusters for Wii because the fear was, well, so much of Nintendo's audience on Wii are casual folks that are buying Nintendo games, sports games, fitness games, these bundle games that have a bunch of carnival minigame-like experiences. So despite it being the #1 best-selling platform of the generation, didn't get a lot of these third-party heavy hitters. Nintendo Switch is very different though. It's satisfying the needs of the hardcore gamer. Yes, a lot of Nintendo's own games are selling just mind-blowing well, but third parties are reporting success with Nintendo Switch versions of the games. Dragon Ball FighterZ, Capcom's early effort of Ultra Street Fighter 4, the Final Challengers, third-party games doing well on the system. Monster Hunter, Minecraft, the amount of players that are playing Fortnite Mortal Kombat 11, all successful games on Nintendo Switch. A lot of the indie games are doing really well on the console. You're seeing successful sales of titles like Hades, titles like um, Shovel Knight, Super Meat Boy. A lot of these games that, you know, high quality indie titles are not too dissimilar from third party titles. So I think that we're starting to see more and more variety, more and more core gamers buy in big numbers Nintendo Switch games because they like the platform. They love the portability factor, whether they're playing it on portable mode, tabletop mode, TV, the combination of the three. It's really become a great system. And its power level is closer to Xbox One and PS4 than what Wii was to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. And that's also why you're seeing a lot more ports of these other consoles games on Nintendo Switch than what happened in the Wii era. But now, thanks to Capcom, and it's not just them, Ubisoft did have a built from the ground up game in Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, but that doesn't happen too often. So Capcom here, they took their franchise, they took, their biggest selling game, Monster Hunter Rise, they threw it on the RE engine, and they said, let's see what happens. This is the best-selling console in Japan. It's currently the best-selling console worldwide. Let's make something for Nintendo Switch. Whether they bring it to something else later or not, we'll see. And it's doing really well. 5 million is no joke for 9 days. It very well could hit 6 million by the 3-week mark. Within the first month, I'd say that's very safe. 4 weeks, I think Capcom, it's the latest where we'll hear from them some type of official 6 million mark cleared. Could happen in 3 weeks, but to be safe, 4. And that's beautiful. That's all before a potential Nintendo Switch Plus. So what do I think is going to happen next? Well, for Nintendo, it looks good because Nintendo has a wonderful example of, hey, third parties, we can negotiate with you. We want to see you build something for us. Hey, Square Enix, how would you like to make a Final Fantasy VI remake with the Octopath Traveler engine, for instance, using the 2D HD technology, and make that Final Fantasy VI remake exclusively for Nintendo Switch? Here's a certain amount of payment incentive. Maybe Square Enix says, it's still a little bit of a risk. That's not as much money forward. What about a timed exclusive? But see, now you could start to negotiate because you have some proof that you take Final Fantasy, typically has done well on Nintendo platforms, still is a powerful name in the world of gaming, has sequels on the horizon with Final Fantasy 16, possibly coming out by 2022. And you have some nostalgia for a powerful title in the history being FF6 or FF3 back on the SNES if you were in the North American market. Nostalgia for Nintendo fans. One of the best entries in the series, in my opinion, and in many people's opinion as well. And you have that come out on Nintendo Switch as an exclusive. That could work. It works well for Nintendo in those regards, I think. Even if you don't want to stretch it that far and say, okay, all of a sudden, all of these companies, NetherRealm Studios, hey, we're going to make Injustice 3 exclusively for Nintendo Switch. No, I don't think so. I think that's a little bit too ambitious because there's too much money to be left on the table by not having a game like Injustice 3 available on all platforms, right? You want to have that game selling to everyone, kind of like you did with Mortal Kombat 11. But it doesn't mean we can't see some exclusive characters in Nintendo Switch versions of these fighting games, or decent-sized AA level titles being built for the ground up for Nintendo Switch from companies' existing IP. Maybe some new IP with a fresh take on Nintendo Switch. But I think it's safe to say if you're using an existing IP, you have a unique idea, you could bring it out on this platform. If it's a good quality effort, it's going to do well. So I think Nintendo has some extra pull with third parties thanks to this game succeeding. Now, I think it also is good news for Capcom because this shows the scalability of the RE engine and how it worked really well on Nintendo Switch. I think that Capcom can now go ahead and say, we could release Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Devil May Cry 5 on Nintendo Switch. Now, will they release a decently scaled back version of those three games on Nintendo Switch, and then an upscaled version that's more in line with what you can expect to play of those games on Xbox One, PS4, PS5, Xbox Series S and X? Can we see those games come to Nintendo Switch? Would they release them possibly as Nintendo Switch Pro exclusive? Hopefully not. I'd like to see it take advantage of the Nintendo Switch Plus, if that's what it's called, or Nintendo Switch 4K, new Nintendo Switch U, whatever it's going to be called, Super Nintendo Switch. I'd like to see it take advantage of those that new system's capabilities, that upgraded power, but obviously I'd like to see it be available for the 84 million Nintendo Switch owners. So it's good for Capcom. That's not quite what I was getting at in building games from the ground up. Those are just more ports, but hey, they're strong ports. Maybe they'd be cloud versions on the regular model and actual cartridge or eShop downloads on the Plus system. Perhaps you would get a situation where you download the game and you get a cloud version with it, or you buy the physical cartridge and you get a cloud version with it linked to your system, to your profile, no sharing. That's it. So if you're not ready to upgrade to the Nintendo Switch Plus, you can play the cloud version of Resident Evil 2 on your base Nintendo Switch. But since you have that cartridge, when you eventually do get the new system, the upgraded console, you've got that cartridge, you can play it natively, experience it better on the new platform. Those are just some ideas. And lastly, I said it's good for Nintendo because they have a strong pitch for third parties. Hey, bring something of yours over just for Nintendo Switch. It's going to work. It's good news for Capcom because they have other games that use this RE engine. And it's good for Capcom in one other regard because that's good for Monster Hunter. This further helps bring Monster Hunter to the rest of the world. It does very well in Japan. It's been doing better and better in the United States. It hit its peak with Monster Hunter World, Capcom's best-selling game of all time. I'm very proud of them for that. I've been a long-time Capcom fan my whole life. And Nintendo Switch, it's bringing attention to franchises that is in a way new and improved. We're getting the best-selling Zelda ever on the platform, the best-selling 3D Mario ever on the platform. We're getting the best-selling Animal Crossing on the platform, the best-selling Super Smash Brothers. Pretty soon, the best-selling Mario Kart ever. If you separate Mario Kart 8 from Wii U and Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo Switch version alone is getting high up there to, potentially becoming the best solo individual Mario Kart game to date. Now, those are Nintendo IP, but you're looking at the success of Monster Hunter Rise, and it's kind of following that. Here's a AAA budget game, high quality, Nintendo Switch exclusive, that's selling as well as Nintendo's own IP. What if, and this is far-fetched, so just bear with me, but what if Konami made the next 2D, 2.5D, high-quality Castlevania game exclusively for the console? I'm talking Dawn of Sorrow, Portrait of Ruin, Harmony of Dissonance, Symphony of the Night style 2D, 2.5D Castlevania exclusively for the console. Great story, great voice acting, anime-ish cutscenes, long media adventure, multiple replay value, uh, level up RPG system, unique features, a couple of different playable characters, co-op possibly as an extra mode, online co-op, high quality game exclusive for Nintendo Switch. That's a powerful title right there. That's going to do very well, and I think that's going to show more and more developers, oh, wow, there's something to bring in our classic franchises that already have a certain amount of history with Nintendo's user base, on that ecosystem of Nintendo consoles, Nintendo handhelds. It's going to do well on the platform. I don't know. This could be the start of something healthy in the near future and potentially beyond. Now, my overall hope is that even if there aren't a ton of new, built for the ground up exclusive Nintendo Switch games, which would be ideal, but fine if it's not, at the very least, if we're getting day and date games and not this several month later releases on Nintendo Switch after they have already come out on other consoles, that would be great. If Nintendo Switch is powerful enough to run a scaled down version in visual fidelity means and slight performance means of your AAA third party blockbuster games, then it should absolutely have it. There's no reason why Nintendo Switch shouldn't have, the next Madden. There's no reason why, if it can't handle it, it shouldn't have any third party title, because it's overall a very competent system. It can't run everything, that's true, unless if you go into a cloud version or drastically change the game. Is it worth it for Square Enix to build from the ground up a completely unique Final Fantasy 16 with a whole other team making the game just for Nintendo Switch? Because let's say that game is too ambitious in its current set that you just can't scale it down. You can't just say, we'll release it in 720p, on TV mode and have it run at 30 frames per second and totally, reduce the visual fidelity and graphics and lighting. It's just like the game is too complex, right? The CPU, the GPU just can't handle it. Okay, don't release something garbage because let's say it just won't work, right? Is it worth it for them to build their own Final Fantasy 16 from the ground up on this system? Oh, the fan in me, the gamer in me, would want to say, yeah, I might even buy it twice because it would be a different style. It's like playing Dragon Quest XI, going through it in old school sprite mode and in modern day 3D visual mode. It's a game that I would play through twice because I'm getting a different experience, 2 different times. Same game, same voice acting, same narrative, what I mean? Same environments, but just a very different visual style. That's kind of cool. If you got a really good quality, fun, unique Final Fantasy 16, but it looked of a completely different visual style, and you had your PS5, Xbox Series X, extremely high visual fidelity, and then for Nintendo Switch, its own, equal parity game in terms of story and all that kind of stuff. Just, it looked very different, but it ran appropriately on Nintendo Switch, not a scaled back version, a built from the ground up version. I would buy that game twice, probably, assuming the game is good and all that, because I would appreciate that visual style. I would think that that's kind of neat, But Final Fantasy 16 is an odd one to pick because it looks like that one's going to be PlayStation 5 exclusive anyways for a year, possibly, but you get what I'm saying. Maybe developers will be more open to bringing games on the system day and date. Maybe they will be more open to bringing exclusives to the console, or at least, we'll build the game with Nintendo Switch in mind and then bring it up to the other consoles' levels. because it's easier to build a game at this level and then add up to it than build it at this level and come down, you know? However, we're at an interesting point where Xbox One and PlayStation 4 will sooner than later become irrelevant. So the gap is greater between Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. And developers really want to start taking advantage of new CPU, new GPU, of what these new consoles could do that the old ones couldn't. So now you're really going to be limiting those consoles' potential if you're building it for the Nintendo Switch base version in mind and then upgrading. You know, you're not going to see the games in their best versions in terms of overall world building, overall sophistication in terms of enemy AI, and overall GPU pushing boundaries if you develop it in that way. And if you develop it in the opposite way for those systems in mind, you could kind of understand why eventually the Nintendo Switch just won't get a port. But will it be worth it for them to build it from the ground up? That's what I'm curious of seeing. And then the other thing is, some developers just might prefer the staggered approach. Let's release, Spyro the Dragon trilogy first on PS4. Then many months later, we'll release it on Nintendo Switch because there's a chance that people will double dip. And perhaps if we released both at the same time, the Nintendo Switch version would sell more than the PS4 version, or a lot more, or at least the PS4 version less. Whereas this way, we could sell it to as many PS4 fans as we want. And then those PS4 owners that have a Nintendo Switch will buy it again, some of them. And of course, the Nintendo Switch only owners, they'll buy it at that point if they missed out on it on the PS4 or Xbox One. So there's a lot of different possibilities, but at the very least, a lot of that is speculation talk. But at the very least, congratulations to Capcom on, making this game. I've said it before. Monster Hunter Rise, great job being a Nintendo promoter, putting this on the system. You've earned your sales. I am excited for Monster Hunter Stories 2. I'm excited for what's to come in future Monster Hunter Rise updates. I hope the game continues to nail it in sales. I hope it becomes at least your second best-selling game of all time. Hey, I'm crossing my fingers that it tops World. That might not be the most likely. World is out, of course, on multiple systems, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. And for that matter, it can be purchased on people's PS5s and Xbox Series S and X's, so that's brand new audiences there potentially that missed out on the previous generation. So, that game will probably stick as Capcom's #1. But you never know. Monster Hunter Rise could get there, but it should become #2, and that's pretty awesome in itself. So, well-deserved Capcom. Congrats one more time. Other third parties, hopefully this gives you that little bit of nudge of, okay, we were a little bit hesitant in the beginning. Admittedly, third parties were. I've talked to companies at E3, and I knew back in 2017 at E3 when I was speaking to third-party developers, no one will be named, but there was hesitancy in building games for the Nintendo Switch because of what happened during the Wii U era, and because of that difference in terms of specs and stuff from Wii. So even though Wii was the lead platform, for the reasons that I said earlier, is why a lot of developers didn't make these groundbreaking games for it. And Wii U just kind of had this further divide for different reasons. It was too little too late in terms of power and scope for as forward-thinking as Nintendo was in being a pioneer in the industry and having this, two-screen technology and touchscreen and, co-play with unique stuff like Star Fox Zero. It was unfortunately not the most well received. Nintendo entered the HD era kind of late. Wii U, unfortunately, just didn't sell well. So third-party developers, a lot of them told me they had this hesitancy into Nintendo Switch development. And here we are at E3 2017. Little story I'll tell you. 3 months in, Nintendo Switch is doing very, very well, and it's continuing. And some parties told me behind the scenes in some VIP booths at E3 that year, we're starting now. Had we known, we would have started 9 months ago to have something out, by this June at the 3-month mark when the system's hot. We're starting now. Or if we really had the heads up, we would have made this game by launch. We would have had it available for this first holiday season. We're going to miss it. But slowly but surely, you saw more and more games come out, and I think Nintendo Switch is still going to have a healthy next few years. I think the third-party scene is only going to get better. It's a tricky one to say, though, because with the other new consoles out, that divide is greater. So Nintendo's in an interesting situation where they're the lead console on the market, especially, with the last 31 months almost being number one. Currently is at 28, so I stand corrected, almost 30 months, not 31 yet. We got to get to 30 first, We're looking pretty good with 28 consecutive months at the number one spot in the United States. Worldwide, doing well. Japan, Europe, Australia, doing well in every market. Best-selling system of the last 4 years. And despite being number one, new talk on the town is PS5 and Xbox Series X. Understandably so. They're good new systems and they have a strong-looking future ahead of them. But perhaps if this Nintendo Switch Plus comes out this fall with DLSS, if this is all true, it'll be the talk of the town yet again. It will breathe fresh new life into the system, allow Nintendo to focus on good games, build these good partnerships with third parties, use Monster Hunter Rise as an example, get more of Capcom's RE games, bring more Monster Hunter content to the platform, and let's see third parties do more and more. That was a fun discussion. Thank you for joining me today for Video Game Talk with Paul Gale Network. Let me know what you think of Monster Hunter Rise doing 5 million copies in 9 days, and what you think of the future of Nintendo Switch and its third-party setup. Thanks for watching. PGN signing out. Have a good one. Bye.